Charles Oliveira is one half of the UFC Rio main event this upcoming weekend, which will mark the first time that Charles has fought in his native Brazil since March 14th of 2020, over 5.5 years ago. And that night also marked the last time that Charles Oliveira participated in a UFC Fight Night card where he would also headline, and that was when he would finish Kevin Lee. Meaning that since then, Charles Oliveira has participated in 9 consecutive UFC pay-per-view bouts, having headlined 5 of them. And conveniently enough, all 5 of those main events also happen to be for the lightweight championship of the world. But that is not the case this upcoming weekend, as he will be back in a Fight Night main event taking on Mateusz Gamrot in a battle of top 10 lightweights looking to get back into, or for the first time enter, lightweight title contention. The 35-year-old Bronx will be competing one final time before turning 36 just 6 days after this UFC Rio main event concludes, and enters on a 6-fight stretch over the last 3.5 years, having won a fight, lost a fight, won a fight, lost a fight, won a fight, lost a fight. And that last fight was the lightweight vacant championship bout at International Fight Week on June 28th against Ilia Topuria, who would not only come into the new weight class and become the new champion, but he would do so in dominant fashion by knocking out Oliveira in the very first round. So not only is Oliveira entering this fight with not a lot of momentum behind him, but also coming in off of a knockout loss that was just a little over 3 months ago. Now, of course, Charles Oliveira doesn't have to necessarily worry about one-punch knockout power in this bout against Gamrot, as that is not what the gamer has been known for in his past, but he cannot be denied as an elite-level lightweight in this division right now, which is nothing short of what Oliveira has been fighting for nearly a decade. I mean, just look at the run of fights that Oliveira has had since that aforementioned fight against Kevin Lee in his last Fight Night appearance 5 years ago. Tony Ferguson, Michael Chandler to become the champion, a defense against Dustin Poirier, a technical title fight against Justin Gaethje even though Oliveira wasn't able to become or keep his championship that night due to a weight miss, Islam Makhachev, Beneil Dariush, Arman Tsarukyan, Michael Chandler a second time, and of course Ilia Topuria in his most recent outing. And while Gamrot has definitely been fighting upper echelon competition in this division since his debut in October of 2020, it's hard to have a direct comparison when you put it up against the resume of Charles Bronx. But what Gamrot brings with him into this bout that Oliveira does not is momentum, because unlike Charles, Mateusz has won 4 of his last 5 bouts, including his most recent fight against Ludovic Klein that came on May 31st, where he would earn a unanimous decision. And his only loss in the last 2 years belongs to Dan Hooker in a very close back-and-forth war in UFC 305 last August, where he would lose a split decision. And his other 2 losses was his UFC debut against Guram Kutateladze and Beneil Dariush. And Gamrot holds victories over Jeremy Stevens, Diego Ferreira, Arman Tsarukyan, even though that one I tend to lean toward the side of Arman should have got the nod in that main event back in 2022, Jalen Turner, Rafael Fiziev, and Rafael Dos Anjos. So while that is a great resume over the past 5 years, the one thing that has been holding Mateusz Gamrot back from reaching the next pinnacle of this lightweight division is his lack of finishing capability, at least against the biggest name opponents. And while you can technically say he does have a TKO win over top 10 ranked Rafael Fiziev, that was due to a knee injury that Fiziev would suffer in the second round of their bout that many people were hopeful of seeing a 5-round back-and-forth battle. But this is definitely the type of fight that Mateusz Gamrot has been clamoring for years at this point. He is always putting his name in the hat when fights are falling out, when people are in need of short-notice opponents, and that is exactly what happened this time, as Mateusz Gamrot will get the call from the UFC after learning that the aforementioned Rafael Fiziev, who was originally slated to be Oliveira's opponent at this UFC Rio card, had to withdraw to the bout due to injury. And now it is a completely different fight on less than a month's notice for Charles Oliveira, as he was preparing for a high-level striker in Fiziev, now turned to a high-level grappler and wrestler, one of the highest level in all of the lightweight division, in Gamrot. But it's also fair to say that Gamrot has not yet had to prepare for a fight against someone like Charles Oliveira in his semi-young UFC career to date either. Because obviously we know all of the credentials of Charles Oliveira, the all-time leader in finishes, in bonuses, in submission victories with his elite-level slick jiu-jitsu. But over the past 5 years, as he has been facing all of that high-level competition that I listed off earlier, we've noticed that Charles Oliveira's striking and stand-up skills have really come up to par with some of the best fighters in this division outside of someone someone like Topuria. And while Oliveira was preparing for a striker in Fiziev originally for this UFC main event, for this UFC Rio main event, if you look back at some of the last opponents he's been fighting, Arman Tsarukyan, one of the better grapplers in the division, Beneil Dariush, a sneakily underrated, very good wrestler in this weight class, and of course Islam Makhachev, the former king of this division. And in 2 of those 3 fights against grapplers, Arman Tsarukyan and Islam Makhachev, Charles would be taken down twice in both of those bouts and controlled for nearly 14 minutes combined between the two. Not to mention that historically over the course of his very long UFC career, his takedown defense sits at a relatively lackluster 56%, which is something that you gotta figure Mateusz Gamrot is absolutely eyeballing in his game plan. Because we're talking about someone in Gamrot who averages 5.33 takedowns per fight and has combined for 22 takedowns in just his last 3 bouts alone. So I'm going to be very curious from an X's and O's perspective, one, if Charles Oliveira can keep this fight on the feet, because if so, I definitely think that while Gamrot is competent up there on the feet, with the improvements we've seen Oliveira make over the last few years, I would give him the nod in the striking realm. And if Charles can't keep the fight standing and he gets down to the ground, will he be able to get up, or will he be able to threaten with submissions off of his back? And for Gamrot, how will he be able to compete on the feet for the brief time that the fight starts there, of course, and if he cannot find success in the takedown realm, or if Oliveira is able to get back up or threaten him enough from bottom that Mateusz doesn't want to be down there any longer. This is a massive fight for the current state of the lightweight division as we are entering into the last few months of 2025 and into a brand new year of 2026 with a brand new champion at the top. Especially with a title fight not confirmed for Ilia Topuria at the moment, the field is wide open for contenders to continue to rise. For Oliveira, can he hold his spot in the top 5 and amongst the title contenders? And for Gamrot, will he finally be able to break through, get that signature win that he has been eyeing for years, and potentially be just one more win away from his first ever title shot? I want to get your thoughts on this short notice UFC Rio main event down in the comments below. What do you make of the run of Charles Oliveira over the last 5 years, all of the pay-per-views that he has been a part of, finally being brought back to a fight night card, but in a big-time spot headlining in his home country of Brazil for the first time in over 5.5 years? Give me your predictions for this bout and what you foresee happening over the course of the 25-minute or less fight down in the comments below. Next, we move to the co-main event in a very important fight in the bantamweight division, which is front of mind right now for the MMA community because just a few short days ago at UFC 320, we saw the championship be defended in this weight class once again by the current reigning king, that is Merab Dvalishvili. It was his 3rd successful title defense, all of them happening in 2025, and he's even chopping at the bit to get back in there a 4th time before the year runs out in December on the pay-per-view card. So looking to keep his name in the mix and within the top 10 of the division is the former flyweight champion turned bantamweight contender Deiveson Figueiredo, and standing in his way is the 15th ranked Montel Jackson, who may just be one of the more underrated ranked fighters on the entire UFC roster, looking to far and above get the biggest win of his entire career and launch himself numerous spots up the rankings into the top 10 and become a legitimate threat and player in this 135 loaded division. The former flyweight champion Deiveson Figueiredo made his UFC debut in the bantamweight division in December of 2023 after over 6 years spent in the flyweight division, including becoming the flyweight champion, having a quadrilogy rivalry with Brandon Moreno and everything in between. And his 135-pound run was very successful to kick it off because he went 3-0 at 135 in his first 3 bouts with wins over Rob Font in his debut fight, the former champion Cody Garbrandt at UFC 300 last April, where not only would he win, but he would pick up a submission, and he would beat the former title challenger Marlon Chito Vera via decision last August. However, the momentum of Figueiredo at 135 would be halted by another former champion, this time Petr Yan, in their fight in November, where Yan would win a 25-minute decision. And then in Figueiredo's only fight of 2025 so far, in the UFC Des Moines main event in Iowa, he would lose to Corey Sandhagen, who just challenged for the championship against Merab in the aforementioned UFC 320 title bout. And Figueiredo would not only lose that fight, but he would be stopped in the second round. However, it was a bit wacky because it was partly due to Corey Sandhagen's very versatile attack, mixed in with a knee injury on the side of Figueiredo as well, that may or may not have been caused from the moveset and skills of Corey. And thankfully for Davison, it wasn't a very serious injury, because now, just a little over 5 months later to the day, he is returning in a co-main event slot, looking to hold his spot and keep himself from losing a third straight fight. The 33-year-old 15-2 Montel Quick Jackson has been silently rising up the bantamweight ranks for years at this point, after his 2018 Dana White Contender Series performance that would earn him a contract into the promotion. Montel Jackson has tallied off 6 consecutive victories, with 2 of his last 3 coming by way of first-round knockout, and his most recent win was a decision against the undefeated at that time Daniel Marcos back in May on the very same fight card where Figueiredo would face off with Sandhagen. I am very much looking forward to Montel Jackson's performance here, and if he can answer the call in what is hands down the biggest jump up in competition that he has ever had, and in the same breath is the biggest opportunity of his career to date. And while he is right in those prime years of 33, his opponent Figueiredo is now 37 years of age, and it doesn't get any easier the older you get, especially in these lower weight classes. And Montel Jackson is an extremely durable fighter as well, having never been finished in his career, which could pay dividends in a fight against Figueiredo, who has finished 18 of his 24 victories. And now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, that title fight at UFC 320 is kind of kickstarting a little mini marathon in this bantamweight division. Obviously, we had the champion versus the 4th ranked Sandhagen, with Merab retaining the title. Now we have the number 8 ranked Figueiredo versus the 15th ranked Montel Jackson. And at UFC 321 on October 25th, we're going to see Umar Nurmagomedov, the former title challenger and currently ranked number 2 bantamweight, taking on the 8th ranked Mario Bautista, who is on the biggest win streak in the entire division outside of the champion Merab Dvalishvili. And I almost forgot that sandwiched in between this event and that UFC 321 event is the October 18th event in Vancouver, Canada, where we're going to see Marlon Chito Vera, the former title challenger and number 7 ranked bantamweight in the world, taking on another surging bantamweight in Ayman Zahabi, who is number 9. So yeah, scratch what I said earlier. This isn't a mini marathon. This is a straight up bantamweight title contender marathon going on that was kickstarted at UFC 320 and runs through the end of October. So this is of the utmost importance for Davison Figueiredo and Montel Jackson, who are up second. And in the featured bout, we have an absolute guaranteed banger going down between Vicente Luque and Joel Alvarez in the welterweight division. Yes, welterweight, not lightweight. Joel Alvarez is bumping up to 170. For years at this point, Vicente Luque has been known as one of the most exciting fighters on the entire UFC roster, but he is on a stretch of poor results on his part, having lost 4 of his last 6 bouts entering this fight against the dangerous Alvarez, including his most recent outing back in June at UFC 316, where he would fight and lose and be submitted by Kevin Holland. However, if we peel back the curtain on that last 6 fight stretch and take a look at the competition, you'll see that the other losses for Luque were Joaquin Buckley, a top 10 welterweight, Jeff Neal, the 12th ranked welterweight, and Bilal Muhammad, the former champion and number 1 ranked welterweight. And it also blows my mind that somehow Vicente Luque is just 33 years of age, even though he has been in the UFC for over a decade now, dating back to July 12th, 2015 on an Ultimate Fighter finale card. And I say that this fight is a guaranteed banger because on the side of Luque, out of his 23 victories, he has finished 20 of them with 11 knockouts and 9 submissions, and having been finished in 5 of his 11 losses. And his counterpart and former lightweight top 15 fighter Joel Alvarez has finished all 22 of his professional victories, a 100% finish rate with 5 knockouts and 17 submissions, and been finished in 2 of his 3 losses by way of knockout. For the Spaniard Joel Alvarez, he is 7-2 in his UFC career so far since making his debut back in 2019, so not the biggest sample size in terms of the years in the company versus the fights. However, that is still a very solid record, and his losses are to elite level talents. His debut was against Damir Ismagulov over the course of a decision that he would lose, and the only other loss on his resume in the Ultimate Fighting Championship was to Arman Tsarukyan back in February of 2022. Outside of that, it's 7 victories, with 4 of them coming in the very first round, including his most recent bout against Drakkar Klose in December of last year, where he would earn a flying knee knockout. So while the activity and strength of schedule side with Vicente Luque heading into this bout, the momentum and upside and potential of Joel Alvarez is on his side, in my opinion. And it's worth noting that Joel Alvarez was one of the tallest lightweights on the current roster during his time at 155, standing at 6'2", meaning that although he's coming up 15 pounds to 170, he's still going to be 3 inches taller than his opponent Luque and have a 1.5 inch reach advantage. So from a physique standpoint, he should fit in quite well with most of the top 15 level welterweights, if I'm being honest. Now we just have to see if his skill set and finishing prowess can also carry up with him. Because if he can come in here on his welterweight debut and dispose of Vicente Luque, he will absolutely be getting a big name opponent in the top 15 in his second outing. And I want to discuss one more fight from a storyline perspective, and it does feature a top 15 heavyweight, and that is the brother of Johnny Walker, top 15 light heavyweight, Walter Walker, taking on the brother of Kamaru Usman, Muhammad. The 27-year-old, 14-1, 15th ranked heavyweight in the world, Walter Walker, has been on an absolute mission since falling short in his UFC debut back in April of last year, having won his last 3 bouts in a row, all in the first round, all by way of submission, and all 3 of them by way of heel hook. Yeah, that's something we don't see very often, especially amongst the big boys at heavyweight. And those victories came against Junior Tafa, Dontel Mays, and Kennedy Nzechukwu, his most recent bout, that came in July at UFC Nashville. And his opponent, Mohammed Usman, the PFL alum, turned 6-fight UFC veteran now, has a record of 4-2 since joining the promotion in August of 2022. However, 5 of his 6 outings have ended by way of decision, and he has not been labeled as the most exciting heavyweight on the roster by any means, and has yet to really have that marquee victory so far in his brief UFC tenure. So I'll be curious to see how Mohammed Usman will look to deter the grappling of Walter Walker, considering he loves to grapple and wrestle in his own right offensively, holding his opponents down on the mat, not allowing them to do much from an offensive standpoint themselves. But if he decides to do that with Walter Walker, he could find himself in danger, even with Walker being on his back playing from the bottom, with those nasty jiu-jitsu skills that, quite frankly, not a lot of other heavyweights have currently in the top 15. And if Walter can find a way to get another victory, especially if it's another convincing finish, dare I say a 4th consecutive heel hook, I believe then that the UFC will really look to launch him quickly up the top 15 in a heavyweight division that needs some new blood, at least amongst the top 5 title contender area. And of course, if Mohammed Usman can end the momentum of Walker and extend his win streak to 2 in a row, he himself will get a ranking next to his name come next Tuesday morning. So that is it for the UFC Rio preview, and I want to get all of your thoughts, your predictions, and your bets down in the comments below. And if there was a fight that I didn't mention on here that you're looking forward to, be sure to share that as well with the community, and we'll start a discussion. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new, because we are on the road to reaching 1,000 subscribers, and the goal is to do so by the end of 2025, so any and all support is greatly appreciated. You can also join the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA on X, Instagram, and TikTok, as well as like the Facebook page Verbal Sparring MMA, and you can follow on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple, where every Monday and Friday podcast episodes release there. Have a great weekend, enjoy the fights, and I will see you all in the next video.